Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory, prices, and delivery of cards for Magic Online. I am Evan Irwin, and we get started each Top 10 by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
What's cooking, good looking?
Ruben Bressler.
Greetings, friends. How are you doing today?
Great. I never know which side the camera's like backwards, but it's not really. It's like a mirror. I don't know. It's strange.
Sure. It's difficult. You have a 50-50 shot every time, so.
Well, I appreciate you being a mirror enforcer, though. That's really big of you.
Oh,
thanks.
I like that. That was good.
Raw. Man, with the jokes, y'all. That's what we do here. Ruben, You got a lot of cards behind you back there. What's going on?
I do. So I'm presently living at one Mr. Gavin Verhey's abode. He's been kind enough to let me stay at his house for the week, but leading up to Grand Prix Seattle, where I will be a featured guest as a spell slinger, and there will be a bounty on my head for the bounty events. And I visited Wizards of the Coast headquarters. I went to the Motherland today, and while there, I met with Scott Van Essen, a.k.a. the Purple Baron, on Twitter. He's a big fan of the show. He's a patron, and he gave me this giant Kaijudo card that you see behind me because I happened to be there, and he knows I used to play Kaijudo. So back when Kaijudo was a thing. And so, yeah, I have to figure out how to take this on the plane with me back to Las Vegas, so we'll see how that works out. But I'm very, very pleased with that as a gift, and I couldn't be happier. It was a ton of fun to be up there at WotC, and we had a great conversation. He's working mostly on Duel Masters these days, but a lot of Magic folks will know him as he was a finalist in the Great Designer Search 1 and 2, and so now he's got a job up there at WotC, mostly with Duel Masters these days.
Wow, and that's terrific. And Duel Masters, for those who don't know, they've tried many times to make Duel Masters work in America. They've run up that mountain and got crapped on and died, and then they ran up that mountain and crapped on and died.
I also got a new promo card. They're making these split cards. I know most of you can't read Japanese, but they're making these split cards now, where you can see one of these costs 9 and one of these costs 7. Look at this weirdo card. Just soak all that in for a second, if you can even see it. So I got a promo from the new set. So
wow,
very cool.
That is very cool. And and Duel Masters is where Wizards really gets to play with crazy stuff. Like, Duel Masters has already had tricolor mana. We have hybrid mana, and that's a big thing. Now, they've had tricolor for years and years and years.
Wow. Absolutely.
And they do some crazy stuff over there just to see if it'll work. And if it'll work, then they can do it in Magic. But it's really interesting how that's their sort of testing ground. We also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most luxuriant, and letting us know what card we didn't choose as one of our top 10 shard cards. Ruben?
Well, there was a comment from Reddit this week that was quite luxuriant, and it's from Free Look 93. There is one obvious legendary creature omitted from this list, sporting some of the most iconic artwork in all of Magic history. It is a travesty that the mighty Feldegriff is absent from all 3 lists. Feldegriff does everything you'd ever need from a creature. It evades blockers, it gains life, it draws cards, it creates hippo tokens, and you can bounce it for a single blue mana. True, it can only draw cards, gain life, and create creature hippos for your opponent, but it can still do those things.
It can, in fact, do those things. For those who don't know, it is originally from Alliances.
There you go.
Amazing set. Green, blue, white, and a generic mana for a 4/4 legendary Feldegriff. For a green mana, it gains trample to end the turn, and you make a 1/1 green hippo creature token for target opponent. For white, it gains flying, and target opponent gains 2 life. And for blue, you return it to its owner's hand, and target opponent may draw a card. So a unique card, very much in the sort of feel good, get everybody stuff. Let my Feldegriff do what I want.
This is the progenitor of the group hug EDH decks, the everybody get along so everybody can survive for the rest of the game motif, and just a great honorable mention.
I think it's also another card you can file in the Cruel Ultimatum folder, and that this is another card that just has a massive following to it, where you're not really sure in a vacuum, it's not very good, quite honestly, kind of like Cruel Ultimatum, but, there are just those diehard fans that, like, they love it. They love the art. Dirtling around, Bruce, the young man from, or Dave, the young man from Mana Deprived, he used to do those comics with it all the time. And so, yeah, it just has a massive following behind it that I don't think anybody could have predicted.
It's really strange looking at Questing Feldgriff from Plane Shift.
Yeah.
Where it has different abilities, but kind of the same abilities. All the opponents all get the same stuff, but the abilities all do different things.
Yeah.
Which is just strange. I'm sure
whenever you have a send up like that, a decade later, I'm waiting for Feldgriff number 3. We'll get one soon, I'm sure.
Awesome. So please hit me up on Reddit, since you're already there, at the Mr. Orange account, and MISTER Orange, and I will get you your super cool gift certificate, because you were...
Congrats.
So congratulations on that awesome honorable mention. Get $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com, and spend it on something sweet. So, we're going to get here to our top 10. Moving on, and this is our top 10 spellbook cards. This is, first of all, if the spellbook was 10 cards, because we're a top 10 show. We don't change it, because... Yeah. We design the restraints around here, okay? We put the boxes. We say where we can go. So anyway, if there was a spellbook, first of all, I focused mainly on sorceries and instants because I felt like it was spells. If I was casting spells, that was just me, not you guys. I'm just telling you.
Yeah, I didn't do that.
Everything's different, and that's fine. And my list would be a lot different if I had included artifacts or if I included creatures and stuff like that. Sure. I felt like more.
I even have a land in mine.
My signature spellbook is just like my own personal journey through Magic. I wanted to tell my story. It's my. I guess it's not really a spellbook so much as it's an autobiography. But these are the cards that are the 10 that I identify most with my history in Magic.
Same.
So, and then that's essentially what I did with mine, except I just kind of gave myself some different criteria.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And number 10 is very representative in terms of what I felt like I tried to do, particularly when I first got started making content, which is, I kind of wanted to get everybody excited about a thing. Everybody kind of come do a thing. And what spell could represent that? And what spell have I played before that thematically represented that? That was a very powerful card that I really enjoyed playing. And so sort of thematically and sort of story-wise for me, Court of Calling is a very sort of core spell that's really awesome from greens. 3 green and X. It was originally printed in Ravnica, City of Guilds. Again, another very important set to me. The pre-release from that point on was incredible, changed my life. It was awesome. Anyway, 3 green and X. Court of Calling is a rare instant with Convoke. Your creatures can help cast this spell. Each creature you tap while casting the spell pays for 1 generic mana or 1 mana of that creature's color. You search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less and put it onto the battlefield. Then shuffle your library. So everybody's helping out. Everybody's making a super cool thing. Everyone's getting excited about it. I love the card. The card's always been great.
Yeah, card's super. It's a great one to put in a spellbook as a reprint too, because that foil, boy howdy, that's going to be a good one. But it's super iconic for you, bringing the people together, being the storyteller, and the convoking together to bring something bigger than the sum of its parts. Perfect fit.
My stomach drops every time I see a Court of Calling because I never know what's going to happen, where it's like, with Coco, you still don't know what's going to happen, but there's still that limitation there of, okay, this many cards, this many creatures, I think there's even a casting cost restriction, this is the thing, but it's like with Court, it's like, they're like Court for 5, and you're immediately like going through the Rolodex in your mind of like, what costs 5, what costs 5?
Right. just like a Mr. Orange video upload, you never know, is it going to be Forgotten Lore? Is it going to be Magic Mike's? Is it going to be a Magic show? What's happening? I don't even know.
And God bless the commenters who reply to our videos and say, "Oh man, I thought this was a Forgotten Lore."
Yeah, of course. Sure.
Wow, and a free help and a guilt in my number 10. That's great. Thanks, guys.
Friend.
You rule. Ruben, what's your number 10?
My number 10 is one of the first rares I ever opened in a booster pack. The first rare I ever opened in a booster pack was Dingus Egg. But I didn't put that in my spellbook. I opened one of the first cards that I opened and then proceeded to play and play and play. It's the first card that I got a signed play set of, one of each in 4 different languages, at Origins by Mr. Mark Poole. And very specifically in my spellbook is a 4th edition Birds of Paradise. Birds of Paradise is an 0/1 for a green mana, and the 4th edition version says summon mana birds. It has flying, and has tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. And the 4th edition version says play this ability as an interrupt, which was somewhat relevant. But I'm sure we'll get updated Oracle text on the Spellbook version. Birds of Paradise, it's had 25, 30 versions of it, I'm sure, by this point. Lots of different types of art. But of course, this one is the one that's nearest and dearest to my heart.
Wow, it's had.
You would play the white border
printings.
one too.
I did play the white border. Hey, look, 12-year-old Ruben didn't have a lot of choices. All right, I had my allowance, and I had whatever money I made from trading, and this was the Birds of Paradise that I got. They were beat to hell. One was German, one was French. I think one was Italian, and then the last one was English.
Oh.
I think that the Italian version was left adjusted rather than center adjusted, like all the other languages. And so they didn't even look the same, even though they were all from the same set. This one is just very special to me.
Wow. And again, 24 printings is a hell of a lot of printings.
Yeah.
I mean, and this was one of the cards back in the day, it was like to have your set of birds, like that was a thing. I mean, there were certain sort of watermarks as a Magic player, and one of them was you had to have a set of birds because
absolutely
birds were always good and they always kept printing them until they stopped. And then you were like, but I love Birds of Paradise.
Yeah. Well, the famous story about Birds of Paradise is that the art for Birds of Paradise was initially going to be the art submitted for for Volcanic Island.
Yeah.
But they decided that the art didn't necessarily match up with what they wanted for Volcanic, and they said, we'll keep the art, we'll invent a card for it, but, make another Volcanic or a Tropical, one of the two, I forget which. And then Birds ended up being as popular as either of the dual lands and just so iconic in its own right.
Absolutely. That's awesome. So, Aaron, what's your number 10?
My number 10 came out very recently in Ixalan, and I started getting tagged in this card almost from the moment it was released. And there are certain cards that people see that make them think of me. If it has anything to do with graveyards, reanimation, if you're particularly snarky, you will tag me in Graveyard Hate, just very hashtag on-brand things. And so I couldn't figure out why I was being tagged in this blue card, because nothing about it was me. But then I took a look at the artwork, and I saw that this could very well be my invitational card. I bear a very strong resemblance to the wife of the artist who was the inspiration for this piece. My number 10 is Deadeye Quartermaster. So Deadeye Quartermaster is 3 and a blue. It is a creature human pirate, 2/2. When Deadeye Quartermaster enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an equipment or vehicle card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. And if you look very closely, the character is a lady with windswept red curly hair, looking very badass on the front of a ship. And immediately people caught on to the fact that I resemble this woman. And the artist confirmed that he's never met me. This is his wife. But people kind of latched onto it. I've signed several of these. I've had people send me foil copies of this. I've had people tell me their pre-release stories or their limited stories where they say that they've won because of this card. And so it felt very nice to have just sort of a happy coincidence of me happening to look like a character, and also on a card that isn't half bad either.
Oh man, that's sweet.
Yeah, right.
For Ixalan having the super cool pirates and having one, you're just like, wait a minute, I like that, because that happens to people. It happens to people around the community. It's like that person looks like Travis Woo. That person looks
Rada.
like you. That person like
Rada.
They just released an updated version of Rada, who is a dead ringer from my friend Kate Donnelly from Hipsters of the Coast. And Kate had posted a selfie the day before, and Rada's also got some curves. She's a curvy lady, which is fun. But I was like, Kate. I was like, the body type, the face, it just sometimes works out like that, and it's awesome. And I have to cosplay this one of these days. I swear I'm going to get around to it.
That hook is too cool not to cosplay.
It's really the only thing holding me back is I'm not good at Warbla. The kids call it Warbla. That's what they use to make their weapons. So someone's going to have to make the hook. If I can get the hook, it's on. But
nice. Easily
the hook brings you back, so.
On my way to hook your man.
Wow. That's a Blues Traveler reference, y'all. That's straight from the 90s. From the 90s. Ruben, what's your number 9, speaking of 90s?
Traveling a little bit up in time, not too far up in time. This one actually affected me more in college when I built my first Elder Dragon Highlander deck. And this was my first general for that deck. But this is a card that was originally printed back in Legends, and so we'll stick it into the timeline right after Birds, which initially came out in Alpha. Unfortunately, the reserve list cards means we'll never get an updated text box to include the correct errata for Rasputin Dreamweaver. But Rasputin Dreamweaver is my next installment in my signature spellbook. He's a 4 colorless, blue-white legendary creature, human wizard now, that enters the battlefield, take notes, kids, with 7 dream counters on it, or if they remake him, on him, dream counters. You can remove a dream counter to add a colorless mana to your mana pool, so the updated version would have the Wingding, right? There we go. Or you can remove a dream counter to prevent the next 1 damage that would be dealt to Rasputin this turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, he starts refilling the tank. So if you started your turn with Rasputin untapped, you can put a dream counter on him, and he can't have more than 7 dream counters on him. This card was perfect for that first iteration of the EDH deck because, first of all, that was like a real Revelark heavy package, and I wanted to be able to reanimate everything with Revelark. And Rasputin put himself back into the exile zone, into the command zone. It was a real blink heavy deck, so I could drop Rasputin, using some early mana, maybe a Coalition Relic, maybe a Grand Arbiter Augustin IV, drop him down early, have a huge amount of colorless mana, and Momentary Blink, or Ghost Way, or reset those dream counters in any way, shape, or form that I could possibly figure out how to do. Great way to power out Gigantic Sphinx's Revelations, or just play, Body Double Revelark and Mist Meadow Witch all in the same turn and stuff like that. Rasputin Dreamweaver got a ton of play out of Mr. Ruben Bressler, and it's got to be in, and it's a great candidate for a redone artwork for the Spellbook with me in some wizard robes and a nice wizard staff and all that kind of good stuff too.
And the wizard hat, you put on the robe and the wizard hat.
I put on my robe wizard hat. Yes,
gotcha,
that is what
Rasputin.
I do. I'm Rasputin Dreamweaver.
And of course, we're never going to be able to do those things because it's on the reserve list.
Yeah, it's if you wanted to get your own fresh paper copy of Rasputin, it's about $65 these days. So
what?
Little bit. Yeah, man, those legends are tough to come by.
Everything on the reserve list at this point has gone completely insane. Lake of the Dead from Alliances is at $60.
Well, you can blame Saffron Olive for that because people keep trying to make this mono black reanimator list happen in Legacy, and he got his butt kicked playing the deck too. So it's not very good, but people are trying to. It's become the new fetch where people are trying to make it happen.
Either way, Rasputin Dreamweaver, a super cool card, a 4/1. It's the 4/1 that gets me. Where you're like, 1 toughness.
Well, he's secretly a 4/8, right?
Secretly.
Because you can prevent damage to him. He does get pepper smoked though, so
Nice. Aaron, what's your number 9?
I've been making content for a really long time, and after a while, you start running out of milestones. You start running out of things to celebrate because you get a little jaded. You feel like you've kind of done it all. And my number 9 was a huge milestone for me because we've been very fortunate to get preview cards just about every set. Like we've had over a dozen in the 3 years since we started doing the show. And then I had received one when I did the deck tease many years ago, for those who remember my first show. But my number 9 is the first time that Aaron Campbell, the person, had received a preview card, and I was able to spoil it on my Twitter feed. And I will never forget waiting up until midnight and coming up with a cute little way I started leaking it kind of piece by piece, and then my Twitter feed blew up. And before I knew it, I had people from countries I'd never even heard of retweeting my card, talking about my card. I was hitting that Bing Translate like you wouldn't believe, and it was just a huge kind of I've arrived moment. My number 9 is Sacred Cat. So Sacred Cat costs 1 white. It is from Amonkhet. It's a creature cat, 1/1 lifelink with Embalm, where you can pay 1 white and exile it from your graveyard to create a token of this card. And if you do, it's a white zombie cat with no mana cost, and you can Embalm as a sorcery. And this card has seen competitive play. This is something that was toyed with a little bit in Vintage Dredge, which of course I love, but it really saw play in the God Pharaoh's Gifts deck in Standard, where you can use it as sort of an early speed bump against the aggressive decks, and then simply bring it back as a 4/4 black cat with lifelink and haste, which is really, really cool. And so not only did it feel good to get a preview card personally, it also felt good to have my card kind of see play. And this was another card that people started tagging me in, telling me their pre-release stories, and that feels really good to, be kind of part of the zeitgeist like that.
That's awesome. Yeah, so you always remember you first.
Yeah,
as it were. And Sacred Cat's a good one because it's just, it's very sort of, what's the one drop from Innistrad, Doomed Traveler? Doomed Traveler. Because it's kind of like
Blues Traveler, the hook.
Jesus, we can't get away. Right. Okay. Sacred Cat, still a fine thing. It's early, late. It's good. It gains you life. It puts a nice roadblock out there. That's super sweet.
People love that card in MTG Arena because you only get so many rares and uncommons, but this card is just so much value at common for so little mana. I've been seeing this place all over the place in the beta.
Sure.
Cool.
So my number 9 here is about the story of essentially friendship. And the idea that, you know, there was this card that was played back in the day by I believe he was from the Philippines or Indonesia or somewhere over in the East, and his name was Victor Ong, and he loved playing Wrath of God. He loved playing Wrath of God. It was just like his thing, and because and you know, we were super good friends with him, and you know, we would needle him over the way he would say it, and like it's one of those weird, like, can I say this without sounding racist? I don't want to sound bad, but he kept saying Waffle God, and it was just a thing, and we had a good fun with it. We'd buy him waffles and stuff. And you know, it was a thing we did, and I feel, all right, Ruben, am I 51% here? Am I on the 51?
No, you're good.
Okay,
you're
I'm
right.
good. I just want to make sure because we loved the guy. He was great and he was awesome. And when he left, you know, I'll never forget this memory. We stopped at like a Shoney's and we had this meal that was
Shoney's
entirely mediocre. And the waitress kept giving him crap. Like, it was one thing, like, we give him crap. We're his friends. Right. That's cool. But she was, like, you know, talking slow to him and, like, talking down to him. And we're like, that's not cool. And I go, so one of the last things we did was we showed him that, you know, if you just put pennies, you know, down on the receipt, and then if you can get the water glass on top of the pennies, you know, so they have to remove the water to get the thing.
Wow.
And yeah, because and he was leaving forever. That was the thing. That meal at Shoney's was, we were taking him to the airport, and he was leaving forever. And
his last meal was at Shoney's.
Yes, it's so sad.
Was Perkins closed?
It's sad, really. But, you know, there we were. And so in Wrath of God, I always remember Victor Ong, and that was just, you know, incredible memories back in the late 90s for me, when, you know, those were my friends. That was the community that we built together, you know, back then. And some of those guys have died, for God's sake. And then Victor, I've never spoken to him again, you know, but it was a really awesome time back then.
Yeah.
So
very nice.
Number 9. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go back real fast. For those who don't know what Wrath of God does, because I never got around to explaining it.
Okay, sure.
It's 2 white, 2 generic mana for a rare sorcery that says destroy all creatures. They can't be regenerated. Been in the game ever since the beginning. It's been iconic.
In the late 90s, you might have been playing with bury all creatures.
It's true.
Yeah, I can't look at Wrath of God without imagining the old Quentin Hoover version with the guy in the corner with his buns hanging out.
It's just all immediately
about buns. All about them, but they're good buns. But it's just that's sort of the word association.
I remember the Textless Rewards promo with the hole in the earth. Yeah, that's a great one.
Oh man, yeah. In 4th edition, it was bury all creatures. It didn't say anything about regeneration. It just bury was supposed to be the magical keyword that solved everything. It wasn't.
Yep.
All right, so we'll move on here to number 8. Aaron, what's your number 8?
January 9th, 2017 was a very dark day for me. I was driving home with a friend. We were coming home from Grand Prix Louisville, where we hung out with our friends and played Legacy. And we were on the 5.5-hour car ride home when Wizards decided to release the Banned and Restricted announcement. And in this announcement, was a game changer. They announced that they were banning 3 cards in Standard: Emrakul the Promised End, Smuggler's Copter, and Reflector Mage, which was controversial enough. But then they announced that they were banning 2 things in Modern. And I had always been very fortunate to where I had never been affected by a ban before. I had always played kind of tier 2 fringe decks that frankly weren't very good. But sometimes things kind of wheel around, and the deck that you cling to eventually becomes good. And before you know it, your deck has a target on its back. And I had never known what it felt like to be a victim of a ban before, but it doesn't feel very good. And I still haven't recovered from it since, but it was very humbling for me. My number 8 is Golgari Grave Troll. So Golgari Grave Troll is 4 and a green. It's a creature skeleton troll with 0/0 power and toughness. Golgari Grave Troll enters the battlefield with +1/+1 counter on it for each creature card in your graveyard. You can pay 1 colorless and remove one of those counters to regenerate Golgari Grave Troll, and then it just has Dredge 6 on it. And this screwed me up.
Hold on, we buried the lead real quick.
Wow.
Doesn't need the first several paragraphs of text.
It could be
a 0/0 for 5. Well, that's fair, but it could be a 0/0 for 5 that literally only was a 0/0 for 5. If it had Dredge 6, it would still be good enough.
Yep.
But I had some very happy times with this card. Obviously, this card made Modern Dredge insane. It is a staple of Legacy Dredge and Vintage Dredge and Manaless Dredge as well. But, this card kind of evoked something in me, and that I had never felt this way before. I had always played cards that were sort of immune to things like this. And for the first time in my life, I was really having to deal with this and the loss that came along with it, and the bitterness and kind of the wondering of, were they right? Was I really playing something busted this whole time? It was very much a game changer for me and put me in a very unique set of feelings. And I think it's just something that's very humbling. I think, sometimes we can't help but gloat when other decks receive bans of, but it's different when it's your deck. And it's definitely changed how I respond to things like this going forward.
Yeah, there's Dredge was busted and ridiculous and not close to fair. And this is the biggest number. This is the highest number, and it does not matter what it did.
That's the most of the dredges that you can put on one card. That's the most.
Mm-hmm.
It's absurd. I was always a big fan of Golgari Grave Troll because I've always been a big Hildebrand Brothers fan. Even when I was little, I had the pop-up book of dragons from all over the world done by Greg and Tim Hildebrand. And so this fanciful skeleton troll that looks like it's in Coco, it's just fantastic, and I love it so much.
It's fine. Ruben, what's your number 8?
So my number 8, not everything in the signature spellbook can be $1 million, right? Like the Bird's Paradise, obviously there's enough reprints that thing is pretty affordable. Rasputin Dreamweaver foils are going to go through the roof for the Ruben Bressler spellbook, but you need some bunts and you need some dingers, and when it comes to some less than spectacular foils that you could open in your spellbook, there's no card that for some reason I've always been attached to. One of the first things I bought when I started playing Magic was there was this big long box, 5,000 count box of commons. And it had a bunch of the same commons in them. It had, this is right after Exodus came out, so it had a bunch of Thalicos Stalkers and some random garbage like that. Had some Philgia in there, a couple of there were some rares and some uncommons, but there wasn't a ton. But there was about 10 copies of this card. And this card's art always got me. The flavor text is iconic. I'm pretty sure it was in my top 10 flavor texts. And specifically, the Ice Age version of Chub Toad has always been important to me personally. Wow. 2 colorless and a green 1/1, summon Toad. Now it's a frog because they combined toads and frogs. When it gets +2/+2 until end of turn, whenever it blocks or becomes blocked. So it basically has Bushido. It has Toad Shido. But more importantly than everything is that flavor text. Chub Toad, at the door. Run away quick, or you'll run no more. And that was just, I just love it so much.
And that's been on every version that was printed.
Yeah.
Good.
It's that little limerick right there. You got it. And it's also the only thing with Chub in its name.
Sure.
In all of Magic. There's not a whole lot.
Makes it rife for memes.
Yes.
Of course. The porcupine toad with a human arm hanging out of a big gullet is also fantastic. I just love this card. I don't care if it's stupid and goofy.
Is the fact that it's the only card with Chub in the name, does that make it a Chub rub?
There we go.
Chub?
There's the rub.
Oh my God. All right, so moving on here. Silly Chub Toad. And also it's nice to see Chub Toad. It's you can't print a 3-mana 3/3. That's just not okay. Right? You can't do it. If you block it, maybe sometimes. Otherwise, you just take one. Yeah, it's ridiculous. All right, so for my number 8, was a teaching moment. And for those who are longtime listeners of the show, I've already told you the story, but it doesn't matter. I like it, and I won't tell it again. Because it taught me a lot. It taught me about the facet of Magic I just wasn't paying attention to. When I first started making content, and I really enjoyed talking about the cards and talking about combos and decks and personalities and the culture and all of the good stuff, and I finally got to go to the Pro Tour because I won that super cool storyteller vote thing, which is great. And got all the way to Valencia and got in front of the developers and got to talk to, honest to God R&D, people who make the cards that I love so much. And I was just like, you gotta tell me why Thoughtseizes is rare. You gotta tell me why. I don't understand why you would make such an unbelievably universally powerful thing. And he's just like, Evan, it's the best card in the set.
It's the best card in the set.
And I'm just like, wait a minute. Whoa.
Right.
You know, like Wizards is a
Galaxy
business.
brain.
What? You know, it's just one of those things where it very clearly showed that at times, and I'm not saying they love this, I'm saying, but at times Wizards has to put certain things at high rarities because they have to sell stuff. Like it's their job to sell Magic cards, and it was Thoughtseiz's job to sell packs, and it did a damn good job at that. And is one of the best cards of all time. Even after being printed 3 times, it's still almost $20. So that was, again, I love that card. I love that sort of moment for me. Very revealing, super cool.
Did it again in Theros. It was used to sell packs of Theros. There are people that will play Thoughtseize decks when the meta's good, when the meta's bad. They will not leave home without at least 2 to 4 of them, and bless their hearts. I always think it's amusing when people bring in Thoughtseize against me as a Dredge player. But yeah, it's just one of those cards that people, you know, there's very much a dependency on that card, I think. And you'll see a lot of decks that will just, even when you see people brewing, they're like, are we playing black or Thoughtseize? And it's just like, do you know what it's for? No, we can. And like
you take their best thing. You take their best card.
I like that the new art for the Mr. Orange Evan Irwin spellbook for Thoughtseize is going to feature that moment from Valencia of Evan picking a brain and getting a Thoughtseize out of that. So that's quite poetic as well. Yeah. It's like,
or it's gonna
they
be
need to
R&D.
sell Magic cards?
Or it's going to be R&D on the left, and the new Theros version of like the guy fuming will be Evan like responding to that comment of
All right, moving on here to number 7. Ruben, what's your number 7?
My number 7 is one of the first cards that I ever played in a competitive deck. I ended up picking up Magic relatively early, but I wasn't super competitive for about a year, which was still really early. I was only like 12 or 13. I weighed like 80 pounds, you know, soaking wet. And I was, 5 feet tall or whatever. My mom was still taking me to tournaments and knitting in the corner, waiting for me to be done so I didn't get stolen while I was at these Magic. And that is honest to God what happened. Mama Bressler over in the corner doing her thing, making sure that her son didn't get kidnapped from the Veterans Memorial, pre-releases in downtown Columbus. And one of the first competitive decks I ever played was inspired by a popular deck at the time. I didn't really know what net decking was because there wasn't really a net to deck from yet. But if there was, I pulled decks from the Duelist and from Scry Magazine and all that kind of stuff. And this was the deck I wanted to play. And it was a super powerful deck the whole time, in addition to being the first foil that I ever opened in a pack. My very first foil that I opened ever in a pack was in a pack of Urza's Legacy, which is my favorite set of all time, as I've said many times on this program. And my very first foil was Grim Monolith.
Wow.
Grim Monolith is a 2 colorless mana artifact rare from Urza's Legacy. It doesn't untap during your untap phase. It's not a great start, but add 3 colorless mana to your mana pool. These days it's wingding, wingding, wingding. Pay 4 mana of any color, or any combination of colors, or whatever. Pay a 4 spot, untap Grim Monolith. Foils of this are going to set you back like $1,200 these days, so I wish I'd held on to it. At the time, I sold it for like 16 packs. I was super happy. I was like, oh man, that's a great one. Grim Monolith was a part of like a red-blue artifact-centric deck that had things like, I think the only colored spells in it were Goblin Welder, Wildfire, Covetous Dragon, and then the blue spells were like Tinker and Stroke of Genius. And the rest of it was mono-brown, and it had, Thran Dynamo, and it had Voltaic Key and Grim Monolith and all that unfair artifact mana. When Mercadian Masks came out, I updated it to have things like, Crumbling Sanctuary in it to be able to survive long games, and it had Heart of Ramos as another artifact mana source that produced red mana and for me to recover after Wildfire. I just love Grim Monolith so much, and to this day, it's just it's got the same art forever because it's on the reserve list. It'll be young forever, like Peter Pan. And so whenever I see it, I'm back in the chair that's too big for me at the pre-release as a 12-year-old, and I just love Monolith.
$1,100 is where we're at right now. $1,100, and that's just today. Because maybe you listen to this in the future, and you're like, it was only $1,100.
Wow, $1,100 is so cheap for a foil Grim Monolith.
Exactly.
Or they'll listen to it in a future where the reserve list has been abolished, and they'll be like, oh, silly, it's only $20 now.
They just reprinted it 27 times. Who cares? Aaron, what's number 7?
I have always really struggled to play control decks. I tried playing control decks, and I used to treat my opponent like that frog you dissect in lab, where like I'd want to pin down every single limb and like peel it open and pin that back too. And like I used to just want to control everything. I never knew when to turn the corner, as you like to say, Evan, and actually close out the games. And so I really struggled playing control decks until this card came out. And this card is on my list because I'm very proud of the fact that I was able to go outside of my comfort zone, become good at an archetype. I 5-0'd a couple leagues with this deck. I came very close to making day 2 at a GP. And I'm just very proud of the fact that I tried something new, tried something I wasn't very good at, and this card helped facilitate that. I was able to play a control deck. I had fun playing control, and now I'm kind of a little more open to dabbling in control decks. My number 7 is Dragon Lord Ojutai. So Dragon Lord Ojutai is 3 colorless, a white and a blue, a 5-power, 4 toughness creature, legendary creature, Elder Dragon, from Dragons of Tarkir. He has flying. Dragon Lord Ojutai is hexproof as long as it's untapped. And then whenever Ojutai deals combat damage to a player, you look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. I loved this card. I loved the style of control. I loved sort of playing things like Foul Tongue Invocation leading up to this, things that are good by themselves. And if you happen to have a dragon, they're even better. I just really liked the style of control, and I feel like I kind of leveled up a little bit as a player. When I learned how to play this deck and when I did the reps with it. And I love the artwork. I think Ojutai is just a beautiful creature. I love this sort of Protect the Queen style deck, which, you know, some people like to say it's just like Delver. It's like, well, no, Delver's tempo. This is different. But I loved this, and I'm just very proud of myself for taking that chance and for getting good at something that I don't normally do. And if they ever made a control deck in sort of this vein again, I would 100% play it because I had so much fun.
This is one of those cards that, for me, I have a very vivid memory of this because there was a few things happening. One, there was the day where Brad Nelson stepped out of the film studio and he was like, they were in there testing Dragon Lord Ojutai for the first time ever. Just got spoiled, you know, a day or two ago, and he was like, "This card's absolutely insane," and I was just like, "Cool." Because, you know, my buddy was like, you know, well, I'm just going to buy like 20 of these things for like $5. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I haven't heard bad things about it. And yeah, and then at the Pro Tour, Exploded was everywhere, did amazingly well, and suddenly they're $25-$30 a piece, and, you know, woo, making it rain, blah, blah. So
nice investment.
But it was awesome to see, like, right there at the beginning when everyone was like, I don't know if it's a, and Brad was like, no, we played with this thing. This card is bananas.
If you hit even once with it, it's pretty much game over. Like, once you get that loop of the anticipate kind of effect going, you just feel so good about yourself, and especially when your grip is so good where you don't even feel afraid to tap it, where you're like, I'm attacking. I don't care. Hit me. I dare you. And then you're like, you got counterspell ready. You're ready. Like, there's just no better feeling than the confidence that comes with, you know, carry yourself with the confidence of a person attacking with Ojutai. Just
fair enough. We have, well, so for my number 7 here, it is rare that I am known for constructed anything. You know, that's not really my place, at least these days. Now, back in the day, I could actually play decently. I could play non-embarrassingly. And as such, I took a deck to a tournament, and I made a Magic show about it. You can go ahead and take a look at it. This was back in 2007, because I'm an old man. And but it was in Ravnica, and it was at this point we had Future Sight, so you had full Time Spiral Ravnica Standard, and you had Damnation, and you had Lockstone Hierarch, and I mean, like, there was just so much cool stuff happening, and I built this weird cool kind of toolbox deck around Glittering Wish, because Glittering Wish was so sweet. I made Glittering Wish Control. If you Google Glittering Wish Evan Irwin, you'll see my deck from May 2007, where I got 3rd place in this event. And I filmed it because, like, Teneb the Harvester, like, oh, the memories are fun. Wall of Roots was so sick. Oh my god, I got to play Damnation and like Harmonize. I got to play Damnation and Wrath of God in the same deck. Like, it was Angel of Despair.
I remember that deck. That deck was great.
It was so good. So for those who don't know, Glittering Wish is a rare from Future Sight. It is a green and a white mana for a rare sorcerer that says choose a multicolored card you own from outside the game, reveal that card and put it into your hand. Remove Glittering Wish from the game. So it's completed the wish cycle in a multicolor form. There was monocolor, now there's the only multicolor. And, you know, to go to the sideboard and to have have Harmonic Sliver, and to go get another Hierarch, or to go get an Orzhov Pontiff to kill all their guys, or a Debtor's Knell to end the game. Like, it was just, there's so many different ways you could answer. You could have Mortify to kill something. I mean, it didn't matter, because Glittering Wish gave you that time. So with all those Wraths, all that control, all those sweet finishers, it was the mid-rangiest of mid-ranged, and I loved it. It was great.
Every once in a while, there's a version of Ad Nauseam, modern Ad Nauseam, called Glittering Wish Ad Nauseam, that people try to trot out there, that basically has a Glittering Wish package, and you can use things like Dragonlord Dromoka and things of that nature, and Fire Spout and whatever it is that ails you. And it's always just one of those things where you kind of pat them on the head and you're like, that's nice, honey, go away. But yeah, that's another one of those cards I think that has sort of those diehard fans of, like, I can make this work. I can put it in Control, I can put it in Ad Nauseam, and you always just kind of smile like, oh, you.
Tutor's going to toot, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's a good one. So we're moving here to number 6. Ruben, what is your number 6?
So, again, I used to have a competitive streak in me, and one of the decks that, I was on the JSS train for a little, not really train, but I was on the JSS circuit for a little while, trying to get my thing done there. And, there were lots of decks that I was, I played Fires for a while, and I did, I was a net decker who didn't really brew his own stuff, but I happened upon a deck before it got popular. And so I always felt super proud that I was one of the first people in my area to figure out the Mirari's Wake deck. And so Mirari's Wake is my next entrance into my signature spellbook. 3 colorless green-white enchantment, originally from Judgment. Creatures you control get +1/+1. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana of any color of any type that land produced to your mana pool. So you doubled up your mana, your creatures got bigger. This, with Decree of Justice in particular, was the way to finish people off, because you made so many soldier tokens and they all became 2/2s. Lots of cool things you could do with that extra mana. For example, Mirari's Wake plus Mirari meant you get to copy all of your spells. And combined with the way that the wish cycle used to work, meant that you could wish for the first wish and just end up a card that was either in exile or from outside the game. And so I was, basically the way that deck won a lot of the time was casting Elephant Ambush, flashing back Elephant Ambush, and then wishing back your Elephant Ambush endlessly for the rest of the game, just for an endless train of 4/4s, 3/3s plus the Mirari's Wake bonus. Bant-colored Wake control was just one of the most funs I've ever had playing Magic. I became a master of that mirror, and it was just so much fun, and I love Mirari's Wake so much.
Oh man, it is the Mirari going nuts. The Mirari that eventually makes its own plane, that eventually creates Mirrodin itself. It is a very powerful, awesome object, and its weight can be felt, as it were.
Absolutely.
Aaron, what's your number 6?
I had been trying to get into Commander for a really long time, but kind of like Ruben, I'm not necessarily a brewer. I admit that I'm a filthy net decker, and I found it even more intimidating trying to get into Commander when you're trying to build a 100-card deck. It's enough to come up with 60 or 75 cards, but when you have to come up with 99 or 100, that's a whole other ballgame. And so I had seen everybody around me playing Commander, and I just didn't really feel like I could get on board with it until I caught wind of the fact that Wizards was releasing these pre-constructed decks for Commander. And so I picked one up one day, and I was already spending a lot of money on cards for older formats. I was spending money on Modern and Legacy, and so I didn't want to spend a lot of money on this investment. I just wanted to invest a little something, and we'll see what happens. And so I think I spent $40 on a pre-con. I don't even know if I paid full price for it. I think I got it cheaper than that. And MTG Goldfish then did these upgrade articles where, like, for $20, they would tell you what to take out and then some good cards you could put in on a budget. And before I knew it, I not only had a Commander deck, but I had a very, very good Commander deck that began winning pods. And now I have 5 or 6 Commander decks of my own, and I love Commander and I play regularly, and it's all because of this deck and specifically this card. My number 6 is Daxos the Returned. So Daxos is 1 colorless, a white and a black. He's a 2/2 legendary creature zombie soldier, which is hashtag on brand for me. And whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you get an experience counter, and then you can pay 1 colorless, 1 white, and a black with a semicolon, so you can do this as much as you dare, to put a white and black spirit enchantment creature token onto the battlefield, it has this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of experience counters you have. And so this sort of led the way for a white-black enchantment control deck, which I really enjoy. I enjoy the Enchantress style of play. And this card just made me love Commander, and specifically the article that MTG Goldfish wrote, being able to identify which of these cards weren't very good, because I'm not very good at doing that, and then teaching me how to upgrade it for very little money. And before I knew I had a competitive deck, I love the storyline of Daxos dying, coming back to find Elsbeth, only to have her going down as he's going up. And so sort of him with the tragedy of the mask, you see the creature he makes in the background. And I just love everything about this card. I love the way that it plays. I love the flavor. And I probably wouldn't be as excited about Commander as I am today if it weren't for this pre-con and for this card.
Oh my God, it's so messed up because the Wikipedia or the Wikia or whatever Gamepedia article, Daxos the Return. Daxos was freed from the underworld in a cruel bargain with Erebos. Now he is one of the returned, traveling across Theros in an endless search for his beloved Elspeth Tyrell, but she has taken his place in the realm of the dead.
Yeah, and the art's great. Yeah,
it is messed up.
That is crazy. Well, to go here and talk a little bit about Cube. It's time for a Cube card, because Cube cards are awesome. Cube cards are fun. And, there's a lot of cards that are super, super powerful, and there's a lot of cards that are powerful only if certain things are happening. And there's a lot of cards that are powerful that are happening, that work because it's always got a good option. It's always got a good thing it can do. And I'm so glad this thing isn't on the reserve list, because they can reprint it again if they want to. But it showed up in Mercadian Masks, and rarely is there a Mercadian Mask card where you're like, oh man, can't wait to play this thing. A lot of garbage in that set. But what was not garbage was this really cool blue card called Bribery. And Bribery is 2 blue, 3 generic mana for a rare sorcery that says, search target opponent's library for a creature card and put that card into play under your control. That player then shuffles his or her library. You just go get their best thing. You just, and it's great. There's always that moment, when you play it, they will instantly look at their hand and be like, oh, okay, whew, you don't get that one. You don't get that one, but you can go get the rest. Here's my deck, whatever, go nuts, but you don't get that one. Bribery is awesome.
Was a card that people had started bringing in because it was reprinted in 8th edition. When the Jeskai Harbinger decks became a thing in Modern, people started using this as a sideboard card, because if the win condition is Nahiri and Emrakul, and you're typically only running 1 copy of Emrakul, okay, fine, I'll take your Emrakul and kill you with it. There goes your win condition. And so it saw a little bit of play in Modern for a while there, and that was definitely one of those cards that people really had to read of, what does that card do? Oh.
Wait, that's in the format? What?
Yeah.
Bribery is.
Thanks, 8th edition.
8th edition gave us so much. Much.
It's a gift that keeps on giving, that's for sure.
We went here to number 5. Ruben, what's your number 5?
I took a little bit of a break from Magic in some middle sets there. So you'll see a bit of a gap between Mirari's Wake and my next card. But I ended up coming back into Magic after one of my lull periods during college with some of my good friends, one of whom is Nick Miller, who does reporting for Star City Games these days. Congratulations on he just surpassed like 100 events, which is a crazy number. And a couple of my other friends who were Magic players, Brian Toon was one of the folks who I played with a lot down there in Athens, Ohio. And we would jam all our same decks against each other. And this was one of the decks that I really enjoyed quite a bit, was a really aggressive deck from Ravnica block that took advantage of a couple of the really powerfully costed cards. And one of the centerpieces of that deck, and one of my pride and joys because of the specific version of the card that I had, which was the Champs and States promotional version, the full art Rakdos Guildmage. I was a big Rakdos Guildmage fan, and I just loved these were like my pride and joy back in the day. So Rakdos Guildmage is 2 Rakdos mana. It can either be black-red, red-red, or black-black. It's a zombie shaman 2/2, has 2 abilities. Pay 3 colorless, a black, and discard a card. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Or pay 3 colorless and a red, create a 2/1 red goblin creature token with haste, exile it at the beginning of the next end step. I had a what's now called Mardu. I had a red, white, black aggressive strategy that used Isamaru and Rakdos Guildmage and Lightning Helix and Castigate and Mortify and a bunch of stuff like that. to be able to hop down my opponent's throat as quickly as possible, while my friends Nick and Brian were busy playing Pickles Combo and assembling Tron and doing a bunch of control stuff. I was just like, nah, attack you with 2/2s for 2. This is where my wheelhouse is, and I just love Rakdos Guildmage so much.
It was just good. It was always solid. It was great in the aggro decks that you could play at the time. I certainly played my share. And be able to do the timing trick with the when your token goes away thing, and then make
the waylay trick, as it later was referred to, because it says because of the way the end of turn step worked, you got to make a token at your end of turn, untap, and still attack with it.
Yeah, which was awesome. So at that point, you had 6 damage coming across, and
and
that was big game back in
absolutely.
Ravnica days. Big game. All right. Aaron, what is your number 5?
I hated Theros Sealed. I hated it so much that I left early to go on a date with somebody I didn't even like, because I figured I would have more fun doing that than playing Voltron Magic. So I hated Theros Sealed. Couldn't get it up for Theros Sealed, but I enjoyed Theros Standard. And this card is one of the reasons that I did. Towards the end of that Standard, when Magic Origins came out, there were some cards that facilitated this sort of Enchantress-style deck. And there was a black-green version, and then there was a green-white version, and I just enjoyed both of them. Black-green, yeah, and I enjoyed both of them. And this card in particular is one of those cards that when it hits the board, I just...
She starts giggling because of how broken it is.
And it pairs really, really well with Daxos. Specifically, if you have a lot of mana laying around, you just pump a bunch into Daxos, make a bunch of creatures who happen to be enchantments, and then wipe your opponent's board with Doomwake Giants, which is my number 5. So nice. Doomwake Giant is 4 colorless and a black. It's an enchantment creature giant. Shout out to Kev Walker. This art is gorgeous. It's a 4/6. With Constellation. Whenever Doomwake Giant or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 until end of turn. So if you make like 4 Daxos creatures, your opponent's creatures all get -4/-4, and you laugh. It feels great. I remember early versions of this deck in Standard, thanks to Brian Brown DeWin, they would run Mana Bloom, and so you just Mana Bloom for like 0. Wow. And just the joy you feel in casting a bunch of crappy enchantments and wiping your opponent's board. I now have a new appreciation for Enchantress decks. I've toyed around with them in Legacy. I've tried to make them happen in Modern to various, effect. But thanks to this card and thanks to Standard Enchantress, I really got a feel for that engine and how good it feels once it's sort of firing on all cylinders.
During this era of Standard, I was playing Foundry Street Denizens, Dragon Fodders, and Hordling Outbursts. So there's nothing I hated more than seeing my opponent tap 4 for Doomwake Giant. I'm not a fan. No, obviously this card's great. 5 mana for a 4/6 that can wrath your opponent's board at any given time is spectacular.
And a lot of people weren't expecting much out of this card. They felt like it was like a weird limited thing. It was cute. It was whatever. Like no. This has constructed playability.
Whip of Erebos, you just whip it and then whoop, there's the trigger. And it's so good.
Yeah. It is delicious. My number 5 is my favorite card that I didn't play. I've had it played against me to like super great effect, and I've just been destroyed, and that sucks. I've had this card played against me, and its effect is so strong that it left me with no hand, and I still won that game. There's a card that originally showed up in Urza's Saga, and it's pretty cool. I think it's really neat, and because it shows somebody behind bars, and it's 2 black, and it's 2 generic mana, and it's called Persecute. It is a rare sorcery that says choose a color. Look at target player's hand. That player discards all cards of the chosen color. So let's go back to Time Spiral, Ravnica Block, Standard. I'm playing in regionals, okay? And I am kicking butt. I am rocking regionals, baby. It's insane. I'm like 3-0, 4-0, going into 5th round. Play against this person. They start with an Urborg, and I'm like, oh yes. Because I am playing this little card from Cold Snap called Martyr of Sands. And Martyr of Sands, just to give you the idea of sort of what we're doing here, it's a 1-white 1/1 that you can pay a generic mana, reveal X white cards from your hand, you sacrifice it, and you gain X times 3 life. Okay, so whatever that number was, you had times 3. Proclamation of Rebirth from Dissension was a white and 2 generic mana sorcery that returned up to 3 target creature cards with a converted mana cost of 1 or less from your graveyard to play, but it also had forecast, where you could pay a white and 5 generic mana, reveal Proclamation of Rebirth from your hand, return target creature with converted mana cost 1 or less from the graveyard to play. So you can now see the loop of
Martyr proc,
forecast, Martyr. Then you had cards like Gauntlet of Power, which is a 5 generic mana rare artifact from Time Spiral. When it comes into play, choose a color. Creatures of the chosen color get +1/+1. Whenever a basic land is tapped for the mana of the chosen color, its controller adds 1 mana of that color to his or her mana pool. And the last piece, the piece de resistance, is Sacred Mesa. It's a white and 2 generic mana for a time-shifted rare in Time Spiral. At the beginning of your upkeep, you sacrifice, unless you sacrifice Pegasus. You can pay a white and generic mana to put a 1/1 white Pegasus creature token with flying into play. Cool. Because the Corlash, Persecute is the card. Because my opponent made me discard 7 cards. I discarded my entire hand. And that matchup is so good, I still destroyed him. Destroyed him. Wasn't even close. 2-0'd. Persecute got 6 cards in game 1, 7 cards in game 2. He was dead. There was nothing he could do. I gained like a million life. I look at a million life. I was like, I'm at like 72, brah. I got, how many draw steps am I getting here? I'll be like, oh, Gauntlet of Power, named white. Oh, Sacred Mesa. Now all my Mesas are 2/2s, and I can tap 1 land to pay for the upkeep. Like, it was just, Persecute, having destroyed me at a different tournament when I was playing Tooth and Nail, and they just named green, and I died. That sucked. But like, Corlash, I'll never forget when the guy was like, your whole hand? I was like, yeah. And then I just proceeded to just kill him because I was like a million life and he couldn't do anything. It was great. It was
Persecute has a great famous coverage moment from back in the day at U.S. Nationals in 2000 when John Finkel got Chris Benefell, who was mana screwed in that game in Game 3, and he just casually tosses it onto the table and names red. That's a famous coverage moment back in the day. I'm not sure that we're like advertising the Evan Irwin signature spellbook too well when we've got bribery and persecute as our words.
Well, geez,
describing
you're focusing on the wrong stuff. You're focusing on the wrong thing.
No, you're right. But no, I love me a persecute. Casting persecute against like a Dragonstorm opponent is always delightful. Card is super powerful, super good, and it's a great one. Yeah,
I love it. All right, so moving here to number 4. Ruben, what's your number 4?
Welcome to Magic the Newsening. Your home for fair, balanced, counterbalanced reporting.
Oh boy.
My number 4 is Counterbalance. Partially because of that classic intro to the show that I'm, previous to Magic Mike's was most well known for. But I also play Counterbalance at a states tournament in which I built a blue-white Momentary Blink Fairy Harbinger deck with Counterbalance. Fairy Harbinger is a 3 colorless and a blue flash flying 2/2 that allows you to search your library for a fairy and put it on top of your deck. So I would land a Counterbalance, and then I'd leave up 4 mana for my Fairy Harbinger, and then they'd cast a 4-drop, and I'd go get another Fairy Harbinger. Or they'd cast a 5-drop, and I'd go get a Changeling Hero. Or they'd cast a 1-drop, and I'd go get my 1 Cloud Sprite. Or I'd go get a Spellstutter Sprite for a 2. Or I'd go get Mirror Entity at 3. That deck was so good. I very nearly top-8'd that tournament, and the only reason why I didn't top-8 that tournament was because I had a bit of a diabetic issue in the second to last round where I started making a bunch of mistakes, and then I ended up dropping from that tournament. But that deck was so good and so much fun. It never took over anywhere else, but it just ran through that tournament until I got my second loss and then ended up leaving. But Counterbalance for that reason, and also because of the Newsening, of course. I got a copy of Counterbalance edited or altered by Eric Klug with my classic point and raised eyebrow look on it, which I'm a big fan of. Counterbalance near and dear to my heart, even though it's the bane of Legacy existence. The reason why I like it isn't what the card says. I'll tell you what the card says anyway. It's blue for an enchantment from uncommon from Cold Snap. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may reveal the top card of your library. If you do, counter that spell if it has the same converted mana cost as the revealed card. It's not on my list for that reason. It's on my list because of Counterbalanced reporting.
It's ridiculous. The card is just stupidly powerful for what it is. To have lived in a standard environment for a day, just a day, with Sensei's Divining Top is not okay. It's not cool. It's not turn 1 that, turn 2 this. You can't play a 1-drop anymore, and possibly anything else once I untap. Like, that's dumb. It gets around split second, which was a huge thing at the time too. Because it's like I can't even kill it with split second because it's a triggered ability.
There are people who still believe that Top should not have been banned in Legacy and that Counterbalance should have been the target, because obviously Miracles has been able to survive. It is now known as Topless Miracles, which is just adorable. But yeah, there are people who still believe that had you banned Counterbalance, we wouldn't still be here.
Oh my God. Aaron, what's your number 4?
Prior to my number 4, I had played pretty fair decks. I was primarily a standard player. I had played standard Jund at the time with Olivia Voldaren and Thragtusk. I had played a black-green rock deck, which we'll talk a little bit about later in the show, but I'd never really done anything broken. I'd never really had a taste of that life before. And then I saw an article by Travis Wu on channelfireball.com where he had talked about a modern deck that he'd been working on for some time, and specifically a budget version of it, because modern can be a very expensive format. And for someone like me who wanted to get into modern but didn't have a lot of the expensive cards, this was very appealing to me. And so I assembled this deck, I took it to F&M, and I started doing reasonably well with it. And I got my first taste of doing broken things. And after a while, I ended up upgrading the deck. I got the more expensive pieces. And while I don't play the deck anymore, I can say that this deck is the reason why I have since graduated to more broken things, such as Vintage Dredge and Ant and things of that nature. My number 4 is Living End. So Living End is a sorcery with Suspend 3 for 2 and 2 black. Rather than casting this card from your hand, you can pay 2 and 2 black and exile it with 3 time counters. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter. And then when the last counter is removed, you can cast it without paying its mana cost. Each player exiles all creature cards from his or her graveyard, then sacrifices all creatures he or she controls, and then puts all cards he or she exiled this way onto the battlefield. So you're basically inverting the board state. And you do this in the Living End deck thanks to cards like Cascade, Violent Outburst, and Demonic Dread, where you basically just do it for free. If you have Violent Outburst, you can do it at instant speed. With Simian Spirit Guide, you can do it as early as turn 2 if you want to, which is very difficult for some decks to recover from. But before this deck, I'd always played it pretty fair. And when I got my first taste of broken things, I never went back. And I don't play Living End anymore. Sometimes I pick it up just to kind of see what the deck is up to. But I did my time. The deck did what it needed to do. And I probably wouldn't be enjoying the older formats and doing broken things if it weren't for this card. Like, you can't go back. You can't go back to playing Thraben Inspector when you cast a Living End. You just can't. Like, you want to keep going.
Right. The new Living End hotness is the As Foretold Living End, where it's an Esper color deck where you cycle like Strike Riverwinders and Architects of Will, rather than the Travis Wu invented. You cycling like Jungle Weavers and Giant Scarabs,
Deadshot Minotaur.
Deadshot Minotaurs and stuff like that. But yeah, obviously it's inspired by Living Death, these 5-mana Tempest card that recently got a reprint in M25. And yeah, that's a great choice.
Oh,
and let me just say, if you're keeping an eye on Modern currently, Living End has a fantastic black-green matchup. Like, if we're ever in a world where Jund becomes popular again, you bring out your Living Ends, because the Jund matchup is hilarious, because all they have is discard spells, and you don't care, because you're just going to cycle anyways. Like, it's hilarious. Like, don't sleep on this deck, because when it's good, it's fantastic.
Oh, man, because Living Death, which, again, was the card this kind of remade, I got last night while I was drafting in Masters 25. Yeah, right? It didn't matter. I lost the match anyway. But whatever, who cares? It was really fun. Super powerful effect, though. Like, amazing. It changes the way you play. And constructed, you can really time it the way you want.
Changes the way you play. Yeah.
It's terrific. So that card is fantastic. Now, for my number 4, I gotta take you way back. Way back. I think 96. I think 97.
I was 13.
Yeah, you keep saying that. I was
long before any of us were even born.
I know, right? I was 3 years older. Whoopty.
Sure.
But either way, and so this is where I had my mom go to Kentucky with me to take me to a big event. Got to play in the big event. I was ready to go. I was ready to play. I was ready to play with this magical combo. I was ready to play with Ivory Gargoyle and Jockle Hops. My number 4 is Jockle Hops, because I'll never forget. I thought this card was insane. I was like, I've got the Ivory Gargoyle that can't ever die. It's going to come back. I've been winning with it, blah, blah, blah. Because whoever plays with this stupid Necropotence card, that card's the worst card in Ice Age. It's so dumb. Well, for those who don't know, Jockle Hops is from Ice Age. It is a rare. It costs 2 red and 4 generic mana. It's a sorcery that says, destroy all artifacts, creatures, and lands. They can't be regenerated. Or, as it said back in the day, bury all artifacts, creatures, and lands. This is the just wipe everything clean, just wipe the slate, just wipe the board. And so Ivory Gargoyle was a card that came out in Alliances that I just thought was just the coolest thing ever. It's a white and 4 generic mana for a rare gargoyle that is a 2/2 flyer. If it is put into a graveyard from play, put it into play under its owner's control at the end of turn and skip your next draw phase. So it'd come back forever for free. You just couldn't draw any cards, whatever. And you could pay a white and 4 generic mana to remove it from the game, to essentially stop that from happening, as it were. But you Jockle Hops, it came back. You killed them with your 2/2 flyers. Yes, it took forever. Yes, it had no game against turn 1 Necropotence. And I just died. Round 1, turn 1 Necropotence. Game 2, turn 1 Necropotence, lose. It happened in round 2. At that point, I'm just basically out. So it was a realization. And Jockle Hops, I thought, was a really cool card that was not a really cool card.
And Jockle Hops is a real thing. I seem to recall that being either an Inquest or Scry, they had like a behind the scenes, like sometimes they would give you like real life definitions for cards that you didn't think were real.
Jockle Hops is when a volcano erupts underneath an iceberg or underneath a glacier.
Thing. But so I thought, I think that's just one of those cards that people thought was made up, and there was a little tidbit there. Oh no, this is real.
Yeah, a Jockle Hop is a Icelandic pronunciation is way bad. I'm not even going there. It is a type of glacial outburst flood. It is an Icelandic term that has been adopted in glaciological terminology in many languages. Glaciological, ladies and gentlemen, that's a word.
There you go.
Yeah, that's a good one. We're gonna move here to number 3. All right, so my number 3. I love this card. I love this card, and I asked for a very long time for Wizards to reprint this card, and they won't reprint this card because Planeswalkers, and because Planeswalkers are too good, which I said, just make this card again, just make it include Planeswalkers, please, because I loved playing it. It was really cool and extended when extended was still a thing. You could play Garrick with this card. It was super awesome because, again, it doesn't hit Planeswalkers. And so if you can ramp up to Death Cloud, Death Cloud, just the best. Just feels so good. It just crushes people's worlds. It's 3 black and X sorcery, a rare from Dark Steel originally. It says each player loses X life, discards X cards, sacrifices X creatures, then sacrifices X lands. Note that it does not say sacrifices X planeswalkers in there, because you don't. And you use Garrick Wildspeaker to get you to a high count on Death Cloud really quickly. Your opponent loses their hands, their lands, everything else they got, and you have a planeswalker and you kill them with it. And that was awesome. And I loved it. I loved the Death Cloud deck. I love building it. I love playing it. I like the strategies around it. I kind of hated playing against it because it was so good, but I don't care because I loved it and it was great. And Death Cloud was awesome. And I've asked Aaron like a million times, Aaron Forsyth, please reprint it. And he's like, we can't. Planeswalkers exist now. And before then, he was like, we can. It's just too good. And I'm like, fine, whatever.
Yeah.
But Death Cloud.
Once on a blue moon, you will see one Mr. Reed Duke. He has a pet love for Death Cloud if you look really closely. Sure. If you go to MTG Goldfish and you keep up with Reed Rabbit on Magic Online, once in a blue moon, you will see him take that deck into a league, and maybe 5-0 with it. And so he was the reason I started playing that deck. I putzed around with it for a little while back when Splinter Twin was legal, and I can't play it anymore because I just can't do it with a straight face. Because it feels so good. Like when you get to that point where you're like, Death Cloud for 7? And your opponent's just like,
Let's give me what?
And you're like, everything. And that too?
Yeah, and you can use Boseiju, who shelters all to make sure it fires. It's terrific. It is a crushing card that is absolutely bananas. And I love it.
You can use your artifact mana, keep your artifact mana around, or use your Tri-Belders to get ahead on lands. Yeah, just a fabulous card. I love me a Death Cloud.
Oh, man. Ruben, what's your number 3?
The decks that I have had the most success with in my history have been aggressive red decks and aggressive white decks. So I chose an aggressive red-white creature that I have cast on turn 1 and won many a game with. I have finished in the top 8 of many a PTQ, won many a local tournament with Figure of Destiny on my side of the board. Figure of Destiny is a red-white hybrid mana Kithkin rare from Eventide. It's a 1/1, but not for long. Pay a red-white hybrid mana, Figure of Destiny becomes a Kithkin Spirit with base power and toughness 2/2. Or pay red-white hybrid 3 times, 3 total mana. If Figure of Destiny is a spirit, it becomes a Kithkin Spirit Warrior with base power and toughness 4/4, and we're not done. If you do that for 6 mana, 6 red-white hybrid, any combination of those types of mana, if Figure of Destiny is already a warrior, it becomes a Kithkin Spirit warrior avatar with base power and toughness 8/8, flying, and first strike. Yeah, I love me a Figure of Destiny. I played Kithkin all through Lorwyn block. I loved that deck. I mastered the Kithkin Mirror. The fact that I was running main deck Stillmoon Cavaliers and sideboarded Moonglove extracts before everyone else caught on led me to many a finals appearance. I've played Figure of Destiny in every format in which it's possibly imaginable. I can go turn 1 Figure, turn 2 pump, turn 3 play another 1-drop, or turn 2 pump my Figure of Destiny, play another 1-drop, turn 3 pump my Figure and attack you with whatever else I got going on. Whether it's a Jackal Pup in Cube or a Gold Meadow Stalwart in block constructed, Figure of Destiny is just one of the best cards I've ever played ever.
The art's adorable.
The art is absolutely adorable, yeah.
I remember when they made, in Concept Cure Block, they gave us Warden of the First Street, which is sort of like a green-white version of it. And the problem with Warden, one of the nice things about Figure of Destiny, is it has those clauses where if it's already this, essentially implying that you can only do it once. The problem with Warden of the First Street was it didn't have that. So, like, you could play a Warden on, like, turn 9.
You
and
say that like it's a problem. You say that. Wait, hold on.
That card gave me fits where I was like, why?
Yeah, that's an upgrade. You're describing what the card does in an angry voice. I don't understand. That card was way worse.
That card.
Unfortunately.
That card was silly. Figure was amazing because it was a pre-release foil. It used to be back in the day, they'd be like, here's your pre-release foil. Enjoy it. You can't play it, but you got it because you showed up.
Back when pre-release foils were bananas. Like,
the
various pre-release foils, you could have gotten Emrakul, the Eon's Torn, as a pre-release foil. Worm Coil Engine was a pre-release foil. A Johnny Vengeant was a pre-release foil. And, of course, Figure of Destiny.
They basically said, well, let's take the best card in the set and give it to you so that you make sure you show up as a pre-release. And thinking obviously has later changed. And for me, I'll never forget, I was in Tazewell for some reason, Tazewell, Tennessee. That's it's as out there as you think it is. And not there's anything wrong with it.
There are some places I'd rather be.
Wow. Well, all I know is the shop owner was like, hey, I've got a ton of promos, so everybody gets 3 Figure of Destinies. And I was like, woo! And I was like, wow, this card is absolutely bananas. And the guy across from me is like, I got to go. Like, do you want these things? And I was like, yeah. And so I got 6 Figure of Destinies that day for doing nothing but showing up. And,
that's 6 figures. That is. Because, sorry.
Wow. Aaron, what's your number 3?
I came to the realization years ago that I play Magic to feel something, and specifically, I have to love what I do. There are some people that can play the flavor of the deck, they can play the tier 1 of the week, but I gotta play what I love. And right around the time that Return to Ravnica was rotating out of Standard, I was playing a black-green rock deck that used things like Thragtusk and Desecration Demon and Disciple of Bolas, and you would sort of get value, Drops Messenger. You would play creatures that you didn't necessarily care if they died, because they would still come back and do something awesome. And I literally cried the night before rotation happened because I had never loved a deck as much as I loved this, and I never had success like I had with this deck. And I still remember it very fondly, but this card was the piece that kind of tied everything together, because ultimately you didn't care if everything died because your stuff would come back or you would get some value out of it. And I just have never been able to find anything as much as I've loved as that. My number 3 is Mutilate. So Mutilate is 2 and 2 black. It's a sorcery. All creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn for each swamp you control. This was also in a format with Urborg, so everything was a swamp. And there's nothing better than just saying Mutilate for this many. Just a bunch. Die. Yes. Everything. Yeah. Doesn't matter. And then, like, if you had a Thragtusk, it would still give you a beast token. If you had a Messenger, it would come back too. You could play Disciple of Bolas and refill your hand by sacrificing your Desecration Demon or sacrificing your Thragtusk. And this was my first introduction to, sort of rock-style decks. And I had so much fun with this. You would sacrifice something to Disciple of Bolas, and then you'd activate Tragic Slip and have a Morbid trigger. And I genuinely wept when this deck rotated because I was like, I'm never going to love another deck again. And I just have to play what I love. And this deck brought me a lot of happiness, and specifically this card brought me a lot of happiness. And so there will always be a place in my heart for that black-green rock deck towards the end of Return to Ravnica Standard. And some very, very good times.
It's horrible. It is not horrible. Like, it's like horror-filled.
Yeah. There's several. Yeah, there's a couple. This has been reprinted a couple times. There's some really old artwork, which is the close-up of like a woman's face getting warped. There's one with a bunch of animals.
From Torment.
There's some animals, and then there's this most recent one where they're basically melting. But all the flavor texts are gold. I just love being able to say, just die. And then you get that one opponent who's like, I want to know how many swamps. Just this many. Just put them away.
You're dead. They're all dead.
I feel so bad for you that you didn't get to play Mutilate during its initial time in Standard when the Mutilate mono black deck was like the best deck in Standard.
But I cried.
Mind Sludge and Nantuko Shade. You got to play like Laquatus's champion. Faceless Butcher's first time around the block. Yeah, man.
I wish. But yeah, that deck made me so happy. And I cried. I literally cried. I was like, I'm de-sleeving.
Oh my God. You know, all by myself was playing in the background.
Unbreak my heart. Say you love me again.
Oh my God. We're going to move on here to number 2. Ruben, what's your number 2?
My number 2 is, if people don't know me for playing aggressive red decks or aggressive white decks, they know me for this deck. This was another deck that I just absolutely love. In my version of the spellbook, I envisioned that when you get the copy, you get half the time you get one half the combo, half the time you get the other. But because the reserve list is the thing, and we've already got Rasputin, Dreamweaver, and Grim Monolith on the thing, I decided, you know what? We'll just give everybody a copy of Painter's Servant. That's where we'll go, instead of trying to get Grindstone up on the map, but I'll explain the combo regardless. Painter's Servant is a 2 colorless mana artifact creature, Scarecrow. As it enters the battlefield, choose a color, typically blue. All cards that aren't on the battlefield, spells and permanents, are the chosen color in addition to their other colors. This obviously had a Kaladesh Invention come about as a result of it being so powerful. And the reason why it does is because of the combo that it has with Grindstone, which is a 1-mana artifact originally from Tempest. It's a rare. Pay 3 colorless mana and tap it. Put the top 2 cards of target player's library into that player's graveyard. If both cards share at least one color, like if you have a Painter's Servant in play, repeat the process until they mill every card in their deck, and then they're dead because they have no cards left in the library, and then they lose because of the draws for turn rule. Yep, that's the combo, and Painter's Servant has taken me to the mountaintop, to the finals of several big tournaments. My only time I almost made a Grand Prix top 8 was in Chicago in 2006, where I was poised for a top 8 and then lost to Ad Nauseam Tendrils twice in the last 2 rounds, which took me out. I've made the finals of an SCG Open before, SCG Cincinnati, where I lost in the finals to Eric Rill, who's won 4 of the Opens. So, okay, I lost to a 4-time Open winner, right? Painter's Servant, just a near and dear card to my heart, and I just love it so much, and I hope you do too. Because you're getting it in my spellbook.
I can't hear this card without thinking of, there's a podcast that I enjoy called Leaving a Legacy, and they're a bunch of guys from out east. They're from Massachusetts. And when I first started listening to their show, they used to have a co-host named Julian who had the thickest Boston accent I'd ever heard in my life. And when I first tuned in, he was calling it Painter's Servant. He didn't even enunciate. Painter's Servant. Yeah. Didn't even enunciate, and I can't hear that without hearing Painter's Servant. It was just the most Boston thing I've ever heard.
Painter's Servant,
hey, what to do here with you?
For Painter's Servant, That's my new character. That's the only voice I'll be using from now on.
You got it, buddy. Aaron, what's your number 2?
So I talked a little bit earlier in the show about how Living End kind of opened the door for me in terms of doing broken things. But like any high, eventually it wears off. And so you've got to keep chasing higher highs. So I'd done the Living End thing. I was inverting board states, but eventually it just didn't have the same effect. So I was like, all right, what else you got? I was like a junkie. I needed my fix. And then I discovered a deck in Modern that allowed you to win by essentially just drawing your entire deck and then throwing a bunch of lands at somebody. And I was like, sounds good. And so eventually I found my new high, and that felt really, really good. And then I discovered that the only thing better than winning on turn 3 and turn 4 is winning on turn 1, and with similar cards, no doubt. And then when I discovered that you could win in turn 1 in Legacy, it literally felt like my blood was just singing, almost like I had a really good high, and I was like, I just want to feel this way for the rest of my life. And again, I can't really go back. Once I've had Living End, and now that I have this, I just can't cast fair cards again. Why would I cast a Delver? Why would I cast a Tarmogoyf when I can cast Ad Nauseam? So my number 2 is Ad Nauseam. 3 and 2 black. It's an instant from Shards of Alara. Reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. You lose life equal to its converted mana cost. You may repeat this process any number of times. This is a staple of the modern Ad Nauseam deck, which you combo with Phyrexian Unlife or Angel's Grace to draw your whole deck. And then you make 3 red mana with Simian Spirit Guide, cast Lightning Storm, and throw all your lands at somebody. Feels great. Cut to Legacy, Ad Nauseam Tendrils, as Ruben mentioned. And if you have enough mana rocks and just enough lands, you can do this on turn 1. And so getting a Dark Ritual, pedal, Ad Nauseam, and just, oh my God. I've never felt so good in my life. Like, I literally felt like my blood was on fire. Like someone had just injected joy into my veins. This art is amazing. I had Jeremy Jarvis sign this at PAX a couple of years ago. All my Ad Nauseams are signed and altered. The art is fantastic. I feel like there are little Easter eggs I discover every time I look at it. But this card has just awakened something terrible in me, and I can't ever go back.
It's just one of those cards that, like, as soon as I read it, I was like, oh my God. This is... I don't know how it's busted,
it's so good.
But a card can't do this and not be. You can't be like, I can do it to myself as much as I want, and it involves drawing cards. It involves sort of getting a thing to go all at once. Like, it's just too much potential.
If the phrase "repeat this process" is on a card, it's a good chance it's busted in half.
It's just so black, though. When you're playing Modern, you pair this up with something, and you're going to like -50 life, and you don't care. And then Legacy, you're choosing. You're going, okay, I'll hurt myself a little bit more, a little bit. Oh, ow. It's a sweet kind of pain. And then you get to the point. Usually, Ant players want to stop at like 6 or something, and depending on how lucky you are, you can probably stop before that. But yeah, it just feels amazing to be like turn 1 Ad Nauseam, because no one's meant to do that. And you find your petals, you find your rocks, and you just die.
So we'll move on here to my number 2. And my number 2 brings me back all the way back to 2006, when I first started making content. For those people who go to my channel and they're like, oh, I want to see what happened, I want to watch, like the first Magic show, for example, has a much higher view count than you would expect because it's the first. Okay, I get it. And some of the other stuff I was doing way back then. And this is one of the things that, in particular, I think helped me form a friendship with Patrick Chapin, was that when I first got back into Magic, I was like, I want to build a crazy deck, and no one's using this card, and look at all this potential, and look what you could do with it, and this card seems totally stupid, and if I just put X and Y and Z together, and if I play it, and then it looks really cool, and I make a video out of it, maybe Dragonstorm will get there. Yeah. Because before anyone was playing with Dragonstorm, I decided, we should play with Dragonstorm. This is really good. We got Seed and Song, we got all sorts of really good. We got Bogart and Hellkite, which is printed. Well, Dragonstorm is a red and 8 generic mana, 9 mana sorcery, a rare from Scourge, and it's broken. And they decided to reprint it in Time Spiral, time shifted, and yeah, it broke again. So Dragonstorm, red, 8 generic mana, rare sorcery. Search your library for a dragon card, put it into play, then shuffle your library. That's all it. Wait, it also says Storm. It says Storm right there. When you play the spell,
put the word Storm on anything.
It's stupid. When you play this spell, copy it for each spell played before it this turn. So copy spells for free. Bogart and Hellkite was a new dragon that dealt 5 damage however you want, split however you want. So even if you didn't just like one-shot them immediately, you could just basically wipe their board and have 3 or 4 dragons hanging out if you drew a few in your hand, for example. And I was playing it with like Urzatron, which was in standard at the time, because I was like, we need a lot of mana, whatever. Yeah. And there were way better ways to do that. But, and of course the pros kind of took it and ran. But it was so much fun, because when I first met Chapin, he was just like, man, you were talking about Dragonstorm. Everybody was talking about Dragonstorm. I'm like, yeah, the card is broken. Like, I wish I could come into Magic with those kind of fresh set of eyes, because I didn't know the metagame. I didn't know whatever. I was just like, this card seems ridiculous. Let's build around this card because it's fun. I don't really have that perspective anymore, and that's fun.
Weren't people using it with Blazing Shoal and Infect as sort of like the red card you discard, and just kind of abusing it in ways that
any red card that costs 9 or 10?
Yeah. I've seen this in Vintage. It's a lot of fun, and I mean, I don't know what it says about me that I love Storm and Dredge so much, but yeah, Storm is great. And was this in the Walmart deck, or did they hold back a little bit?
They held back on the Dragonstorm.
Okay, because that's a shame.
No hashtag Dragonstorm in Walmart.
I would have loved to have given Dragonstorm
acceptable
to the Walmart folks. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, but some of my
Dragonstorm was not broken the first time around, by the way, when they printed it in Scourge, even though you had Legions, which was all creatures, and you could go get stuff like Rorik's Bladewing and attack for 6, but it needed Bogart and Hellkite specifically. The 5th dragon, just in case you drew one of your Hellkites, usually was the Hunted Dragon, which was a 6/6 with haste, so you could get that extra damage in for 20. Interestingly enough, when they reprinted this in Time Spiral, the Wizards folks weren't worried about Dragonstorm as the combo deck. They were worried about a card called Enduring Renewal, which allowed you to sacrifice like 0 cost stuff and return it to your hand and cycle that along with like Greater Gargadon and some of the other pieces that they put together. Because previously Enduring Renewal comboed well with Goblin Bombardment. And so they were like, ooh, no, we can't have sacrifice outlets with Enduring Renewal. That deck did nothing. Meanwhile, Dragonstorm took over the pro scene for 18 months in a row. Oh, by the way, including in the hands of Mr. Patrick Chapin in a very famous Worlds topic.
Absolutely. So, and I was there for that, and so were you.
Yeah, me too.
And that was super fun. So let's move in here to our number 1. Ruben, what's your number 1?
We're going to bring it up to the present. Mine has been a chronological order of my history of Magic. I want to bring it back to a card I'm playing this weekend. One of the cards that I love. I love like nice big top end beef at the top end of my red decks that I'm attacking. I want to smash face once I get to 4. Once I get to 4 or 5, you know.
4, 5 base, 4th base, home base.
I want
smash it.
I want Storm Breath Dragon. I want Thundermaw Hellkite. I want Hell Rider. I want things that get in there. And something that gets in there, like nothing more, like nothing else, is we're going to go with the Invocation version of this card because it's Hazaret the Pervert.
Oh my
AKA Hazaret the Fervent. Because we talked about Hazaret the Pervert on the show. So, with the invocation wording, it's tough to read. You can be forgiven in any case. Hazaret, either the Fervent or the other thing, is a legendary creature god from Amonkhet. It has indestructible and haste, and it's a 5/4. But it can't attack or block unless you have 1 or fewer cards in your hand, what we call heckbent in the business. 2 colorless and a red, and discard a card. Hazaret deals 2 damage to each opponent, helping it get to that necessary, what we call, I guess it'd be devotion equivalent. Boy, this is a powerful card. It's one of the gods from the new set. Or one of the gods from the newest block, I should say. It is just an absolutely powerful card and one of the best cards in probably the best deck in Standard, and I can't wait to cast him this weekend.
Hazaret was also the only god that technically survived the Hour of Devastation. She was the one who held firm and tried to do the right thing and, kind of paid for it a little bit. I've also seen people experiment with her in Affinity. Modern Affinity is known for kind of sneezing out its hand very quickly, and so just being able to drop her, maybe strap a cranial plating on her and have a good time. I love that people are finding ways to use her. Also responsible for some notable coverage moments with, I believe, is Yamwing Chung, I think his name was. That moment where he, didn't have enough, he had too many cards and couldn't attack with her and, kind of missed the opportunity there. And so, there's a lot of potential with this card. I think there's a chance that, I know I used her in my vintage mono red Stompy deck, again, because you're able to get rid of your cards very quickly. And yeah, definitely one of the more noteworthy gods. And it's interesting that you made this your number 1, Ruben, over so many other like good cards,
Yeah. Well, I was going in chronological order and something near the front. So
Well, let me tell you, literally 364 days ago will be a year tomorrow, in which I decided to tweet around 11:30 in the morning. Someone in the office said the name on the invocation version looks like Hazaret the Pervert, and I can't unsee it. And that thing took off. It has 119 retweets, 459 likes.
Ooh.
It was ridiculous. It was. I was not expecting that. But once you see it, you can't unsee it.
You can't, no.
Wizards, I think it just felt like they got way too clever. And I appreciate the fact that after that, they were like, we're going to pull back.
If I could pick a very specific version, I would pick the Magic the Gathering Online Invocation version because it doesn't have the weird text. If you look at the invocations of these gods online, they look great. They're gorgeous, and you can actually see them in normal text.
Yeah. And again, that's a silly moment. Again, almost a year ago to the day.
There you go.
That's terrific. Aaron, what's your number one?
I've kind of touched on this, sort of my journey throughout the show, kind of I started off as more of a fair deck player. I used to play sort of these mid-range, safe decks, if you will, and sort of my evolution into going for broken things. And, this card is sort of the pinnacle of that evolution. I've been very fortunate to have played Modern Dredge, as I mentioned, with Golgari Grave Troll, or Golgari Grave Troll earlier in the show, which led me to playing Legacy Dredge, which I've enjoyed for a little bit. But my world really didn't start opening up until I discovered this card and until I had access to this card. And if Modern Dredge and Legacy Dredge are like driving a car, having Bazaar of Baghdad is like driving a car on nitrous. If you've ever seen like the Fast and the Furious movies,
it's like strapping yourself to a rocket ship.
And you can't go back. It's very hard to go back. So my number one is Bazaar of Baghdad. So Bazaar of Baghdad, we're just going to go with the clean Vintage Masters text. You tap it, it's a land, draw 2 cards and discard 3 cards.
That's it.
What's wrong with that? But this card is the enabler of Vintage Dredge. It is the reason why Dredge has remained a powerhouse in Vintage for as long as it has. It even sees play sometimes in the other decks because, just being able to search for what you need is a very valuable thing. Card is going for $1,100 a piece in paper. It has since skyrocketed. But it wasn't until I really got a taste of this card where I was like, I've arrived. Like there's nothing more I need to search for. I've sort of completed my quest as a player. This is where I want to be for the rest of my life. And I feel like everything before this has been just sort of practice or a preliminary for this is where you are now, and I don't want to go back. I've had a lot of success with this card. I did very well in the VSL the night that I played Dredge. I broke the Dredge curse with this card. I've become synonymous with this archetype. I'm looking forward to playing Dredge again in the next season of VSL, for which I'm in for. And I just have a lot of love for this card. And I wish I knew when I was a kid that I would need these because I would have saved them. And now they're very expensive.
They are very, very, very expensive. A new car, set of Bazaars. That's kind of where you're at. So for my number one, there's definite for me sort of like there's the peaks and the valleys, right, of different things that happen as I made the Magic show over the years, and I want to think that the reason that this card in particular was well known, that continues to be well known to this day, it continues to be a thing that kind of continues on throughout at least some part of the culture. Is I felt like one of the first times I really I think captured my feelings in a good way, and by in a good way I mean ultimately kind of in a bad way, but it the passion that I felt about this card I felt it came across really well.
Oh no.
And and I think even part of it may have been the artwork that I just didn't like about it, because it's just a rock and some wafty whatevers. But when I say 3 dudes seriously,
oh man,
if you've ever seen that Magic show where I talk about Spectral Procession, you know what I'm talking about, because you can go back and I was like, I just don't get it. 3 dudes, seriously, it was I loved it. It was lightning in a bottle, as it were. Yeah. And I even got some shout outs at that point again, was we were talking about Patrick Chapin. He hit me up, he was like, Evan, I think that card's like really good. And I'm like, yeah. Well, it's too late now, first of all. Yep. Secondly, like,
ship sailed on that one.
Oops. Spectral Procession is a Shadowmoor uncommon. It is 3 hybrid white and 2 generic mana. So you can pay 2 generic mana or a white 3 times. So 3 white or 6 generic mana, some mixture thereof. You put 3 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying into play. That's what you do. 3 mana, 3 1 flyers. It was an absolute format all-star. It helped define standard. It was an incredibly powerful card in limited and constructed. It was easily the best of the cycle, as I called it, the worst, if not one of the worst. And yeah, you ever got something so wrong that it follows you around for about 15 years.
It became a meme. Yeah.
You become your own meme, as it were, and I certainly did.
If you're famous enough where one of your mistakes follows you around for the rest of your life because people who weren't even playing Magic then recognize it, that's okay.
I have signed a non-zero amount of Spectral Processions, let me tell you.
Excellent.
But
it's why I left it. It's why I left it out of my top 10. It probably would have taken that Figure of Destiny spot because that card is just that card is bananas.
Card is ridiculous. Like, it's not
But
even
of course,
close.
it would be in yours. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just, again, I mean, there's one thing, like, again, if I was creatures, we would probably talk about Captain Tickles right now, or whatever.
Right.
But we're talking about a spellbook. For me, my spellbook was instants and sorceries and stuff.
Yeah.
Spells I could cast, and Spectral Procession being well known enough for me, it's near and dear, because I like the idea that, you know, I can make content that makes people happy. And if you get joy out of me being super crazy wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm okay with that. It was silly and crazy.
Black-white tokens decks, you know, the card is fine by itself, but then you pair it with Honor the Pure or Intangible Virtue, and it gets out of hand very, very quickly. Yeah, every time I see this card played against me, I immediately think of you, and I'm like, really, Evan? Really? And yeah.
It was bad. It was super bad. But that's okay, and that's why it's fun. And that was our top 10 Spellbook cards. You will see them on the screen right now for review. Take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you.
Available for MSRP very soon at CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find our spellbooks in stock. No, not really.
No,
not actually.
Never, but that's okay. That said, we want to hear from you about what card we didn't talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. Before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Ruben.
Thank you. And if you want to challenge me to a game of Kaijudo next time you see me, bring it down to GP Seattle this weekend. If you got 2 decks, we can battle that as well.
Right. Bring the Kaijuds. And if you don't know what we're talking about, you're not missing much. It's okay. Moving on here to our final slide, I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, my co-host, Aaron Campbell, and Ruben Bressler, you guys for watching or listening, and I hope you support us at patreon.com/magicmics. Visit our website at magicmicspodcast.com. That exists thanks to our Patreon supporters, or follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv/magicmics, on Twitter at magicmicescast, on Reddit at reddit.com/r/magicmics, and on Facebook at facebook.com/magicmics. Talk to us privately at magicmicspodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at magicmicspodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes, or join us here next week for another top 10 episode of Magic Mics. Good night, everybody.